Welcome back, my friends. This is Dustin Nemos of DustinNemos.com, and I am joined today by a up-and-coming YouTuber, or you might call him a QTuber, Contemptible Thoughts. What's up, brother? I think you froze up on me.
How's it going?
Oh, yeah, it's freezing up just a little bit. There you go. Do you want to tell everybody about yourself and introduce yourself, kind of?
Yeah, sure. My name is Alex Spielman. I create a channel on Facebook and called Contemptible Thoughts, where I break down a lot of the things that are kind of going around and put it into a much more macro sense of it. Think of it almost like the butterfly effect, where you kill a butterfly and it goes up the food chain. Like I'll hit like FISA, and I'll kind of talk about how that affects things and how that is like the long-term effect of what will happen when it comes out.
Very cool. I like the long-term logical deduction stuff. That's pretty neat. So, you talk about Q. You said you talk about a lot of Q, and you go into some detail on things and try to extrapolate and sort of look ahead a little bit. So, this is more about, from my perspective, this is more about trying to introduce new people and build up some other channels, who can get their name out a little bit. So, more or less, if you want to run with the show and kind of talk about whatever you like to talk about, and there's a couple Q posts if you want to run through those that I haven't even covered yet. We can talk about that as well if you like.
Sure.
Okay, take it up. It's all you. Oh, you froze up again. It might be my end. I've got some.
Have the Q post.
Start that part over again for me. I'm sorry. It might.
I actually don't have the Q pose actually in front of me, so.
Okay. Well, okay. So, 1862 is basically where I left off at 1861, where he was. He said it's that one where he had posted the picture of Epstein Island's dome, that little temple.
Oh, okay.
So this one seems to be all about like Antifa and stuff. I mean, he starts off with the images of the modern Antifa logo versus the 1903 German Communist Party logo, and it's just basically the same thing. And even over in Germany, I think the Antifa are getting pretty damn violent and riled up, and I think they're a lot bigger there actually. But he says fake news, enemy of the people. He says, if all directions of the echo chamber MSM state the same thing, even if fiction or false, do most people consider it true or factual? He says, direct communication is critical. So obviously we have to go around the fake news. Says, who controls the fake news? Why is Antifa allowed to incite violence, wear masks, make threats, use and carry weapons, and physically harm others who oppose their ideology? I'll even add, there's even double standards in the court system. Like they get off, they bust open a head, they get a couple years of probation. So it's pretty rough there as well. And then anybody on the right side or whatever, if they even defend themselves, they're probably going to go to prison. So why does Antifa attempt to justify such violence by labeling the challenger as alt-right or Nazi? And why doesn't the left condone such acts of violence and call for an immediate end? So define projection, define insurance policy, and define warning against attempts to unveil. So I guess he's basically calling out what it is. I mean, the elite are just using Antifa as a sort of a bully in the room, a threat. He says that. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think when it comes to Antifa, like a lot of the time when it comes to like the liberal side of the argument and stuff like that, they have a habit of projecting. Like for instance, they're like, "Hey, you're a Nazi." No, Antifa is actually doing exactly what the Nazis did back then, which was beating up anyone who disagrees with their ideology or calling them like double standards that they can kind of go on top of, but they even kind of have their own like workarounds from it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they project everything. And if you try to bring any historical context or anything, you're just immediately a Nazi, therefore a target because you disagree with them. He calls it right there. The next line is all in bold. And he says, they prey on emotionally unstable, helpless individuals and use them as pawns. I mean, that's, I see the whole system as sort of a low scale MK Ultra at this point. Like they've taken what they've learned and then they're they're using that for the mass manipulation of people. And that's pretty powerful.
One thing that I really kind of take from this is, especially when I went to school actually for an education major, and taking from what the campus looks like and all the different environments that come with it. Really at that age, like 18 up to like early 20s, you're really trying to create that form of identity, what you are. You're not just a person in high school anymore. You're now an adult. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what really happens now, is that they kind of prey on these young, fragile, innocent minds, and they kind of fracture them into what they are. I mean, you have gender studies, and then you talk about political science, and all these different things, and they're trying to hold on to just understanding what and who they are, and then you throw all these other things, and it just kind of overloads them.
Yeah, there's something to this, I think, where young people are obviously more emotional, more than reason, mm-hmm. and and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, young people have that passion, and then a lot of times they get into the they want to be moral. They want to change the world, and they get that like righteous indignation, that righteous fury. And at the same point, their heads are being stuffed full of all this fear and division talk, and then that plays right into then kind of using that. They feel like they're the heroes in the story, mm-hmm. and pushing that hate out there, and then that fear mindset and that hate mindset. It's really hard to break through that because they're so emotional, and they just kind of keep that going forever. People sometimes check out of it, but if they start trying to talk to you or something, one of the leaders of the Antifa group will come over and start trying to like shoo them away. Don't talk to this person or something. We've seen so many examples of that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's definitely like a groupthink situation. There's a fear of being ostracized from the group. They hammer that part in for sure. Mm-hmm. But it's just, I'm kind of a farmer, and this works with animals. You can train them from birth. If I pet my rabbits early on, I'll be able to hold them when they're an adult. So, I think it was Stalin or Lenin or somebody said, if you give me a kid for 5 years, the seeds that I plant will never be uprooted. And it's true. Absolutely. And they can plant some terrible seeds in these kids' minds. So, of all the things that we need to solve, I think the education system's like the first and foremost.
Certainly.
Yeah. I guess let me continue. He links to Fox News, FBI probe Antifa ideology underway, with Ray telling the House panel. That's interesting. Let's check that out real fast, actually.
I know that under Chris Christie, when he was governor of New Jersey, we actually made Antifa a terrorist organization.
Wow.
And I think the current governor is trying to work so they are not anymore.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're just constantly beating people up left and right. They want a Gaddafi Trump now. I mean, they're throwing small-scale explosives into crowds and promising bullets, promising to take Trump out one way or the other, these kind of statements. I've seen they've gotten a lot better at their gear as well, like at the local or the more recent rallies and stuff they're doing. They've got like full armor and stuff out there. It's so like there's just so many heads being bashed open now. These people are going to be damaged for life, maybe brain damage, maybe hurt, maybe crippled for life, maybe have their whole identity stolen from them. Maybe they remember who they are. I mean, you hit people in the back of the head, they can go blind. So he's basically, this article is talking about Ray told members of the House Homeland Security Committee that people associated with the so-called anti-fascist movement or Antifa movement were subjected to the FBI probe amid possible violent criminal activity if possible, right? He says, we're not investigating the ideology. We're investigating a number of what we would call anarchist extremist investigations. So, they're just trying to sort out the people who are actually doing the violence. That's pretty hard with the masks. Mm-hmm.
Wasn't there like a bill that was going around that was talking about the unmasking of things? If you had like a mask on, then you would get like a penalty or something?
Yeah, and many states have them already from back in the KKK days, and they could use those same laws if they wanted to. The problem is they won't enforce the law in the books. The police stand down and then arrest the good guys and then throw the book at the good guys, or even help Antifa by pushing them into something. So That part is the scariest part. I mean, I've had friends who've had their head bashed open.
Mm-hmm.
He continues. He says, "What does Ray know, and when will he release to the public?" So, we've had a lot of statements like this lately about Antifa and stuff. I think he's really about ready to deal with that. I mean, it's been a kind of a useful tool until now
Mm-hmm.
to just show the left for what they are, let
Mm-hmm.
them really go full insane, and then right before the midterms, crush them. I think that might be the plan. He says, does such violence, extremism justify National Guard deployment in the future ahead of the planned public releases?
Mm.
Well, we know that we can afford that now with that what was it, the omnibus or whatever, where they got that huge amount of billions of dollars there for spending on stuff. So instead of putting it on the wall, maybe he's going to use it for the National Guard to deal with these terrorists. That'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, at this point, if they keep on doing what they do, they're going to be considered a form of national threat to national security as a domestic terrorist organization.
It's a matter of time until they smack somebody that's got a gun, and that person defends themselves, and it turns into a shooting match, and there's blood running in the streets. And I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope we're not waiting for that kind of thing to happen. But heads being bashed open are just as bad, if not worse, than a gunshot wound.
I noticed that when a lot of these major protests that come out with Antifa are normally in places that with strict gun control, like Oregon. We'll have places. I think I'm not sure if what was it, Charleston? I think was it Charlesville. I forgot the actual name. The one that happened last year.
Charlottesville. Yeah.
I'm not sure if they had strict gun control over there.
Well, no, Antifa, the reason that the guy crashed the car was because that professor from Antifa basically admitted later on in social media to carrying a gun around and waving it at the guy in the car. I mean, I would have drove away too pretty quickly. If I had one of those morons with like he looked like an AK-47 or something. It was like a long rifle. So he was out there with a long rifle or AR-15 or something and shaking it in the direction of the driver. I mean, I don't know what is going to happen to the driver, but that's a hell of a defense case right there. And that guy is really the one that's responsible for the death. But it's insane. I mean, the rest of the post is all about that too. It's a Breitbart article, left-wing Antifa terrorists freaking out over the proposed unmasking law, like you mentioned, and a White House petition on whitehouse.gov formally recognized Antifa as a terrorist organization. So people need to fill that out. Oh, and I was right too, because here he says military spending bill, smile for the camera, boom. So, we already see every time one of these Antifa takes their mask off and someone gets a photo of them, within 2 days, we know their life story. And we expose them and something, so we can name and shame, but, what we need is the government to just back away and let us defend ourselves and shoot them. If they're throwing bombs and trying to smack people in the head with metal poles. But other than that, if we're not allowed to defend ourselves, then the government needs to do something about it for sure. That's my opinion.
Really, that kind of goes down to really Second Amendment at that point, the point of right to bear arms. Right. The whole point of it was to protect us from any form of tyranny or danger to our lives.
Yeah, natural. I mean, it's even beyond the Constitution. It's just natural rights. The right to self-preservation is something that the dumbest animal on the planet knows and has. Except humans, we don't have that right. That right is something that apparently we don't get to have in some places. But even a rabbit can try to defend itself. They got teeth and they'll bite if they need to. I raise rabbits, so I use that as an example. But we're not rabbits. We should be able to defend ourselves. On a side note, I've been working on a type of space age armor that would, if both sides used it, neither side would get hurt. That's kind of how it would work. It would be less a weapon, but more a shield. But yeah, do you want to say anything before we jump to the next post?
Mainly that it's really funny how there's such a double standard with it. It's heroes almost, and then when someone else defends themselves, it's apparently a crime, and they're a racist and they're a Nazi for doing so.
Yeah. You punch back against these guys, and suddenly you're an evil monster. Folks.
Unless there's like that one gentleman in that last Portland thing where they basically saw him kind of towing up against 3 guys, and he was kind of like celebritized by that.
White sleeves, the guy that and he went down.
Yeah, white.
Yeah, that was pretty.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it would go. I mean, people kept talking about civil war. I'm like, that's never going to happen. Can you just for a minute close your eyes and imagine Antifa versus the Marines or bikers or whatever? Every time we show up in force, they lose. And that's exactly how it would go in a civil war. We have all the guns, we have all the training, we have all the muscle, we have all the testosterone, we have the military, we have the police, we have Trump, we have the National Guard. I mean, there's really nothing they can do except blow things up and hurt people when they get a chance to, and cause terrorist activities and stuff. And that has victims, though. Yeah. So 1863 was pretty simple. He posted that that photo with Bill Maher and the Planet of the Apes comment that he made about Michelle Bachmann, and then he actually this is funny because Q is talking directly to Roseanne, Fox News, and Sean Hannity. He says they're at Twitter names. He's like, at Sean Hannity, at Fox News, at The Real Roseanne. Do not let this hypocrisy stand. Fight. Much more coming. Which is interesting because I don't fully trust Roseanne. I don't know what's up with her. She's coming out in support of Q in a big way, but at the same point, we have her on that YouTube clip in the past wearing all the Freemasonry symbol pens and the red gloves, which are Freemasonry symbolism, and then talking about selling her soul to Satan. So I don't know what's going on there. I don't fully trust anyone, I guess. But have you heard that?
Yeah, I actually saw that clip of her.
That was weird.
And it was like I think it was a black or red.
Yeah,
it was like a very dark color.
The gloves and stuff, and that's like I think there's some red boots too somewhere as part of the symbolism. But the red gloves and those pens were Freemasonry symbols of a certain rank. I think pretty high up.
Well, I mean, Roseanne being a comedian, I'm not sure if that was for satire or was that actually literal. That's the thing.
You never know. Like in Hollywood and stuff, everything is masked behind comedy, and they kind of virtue or I call it vice signaling. They vice signal to each other with their games and stuff. So if I see that kind of thing, I immediately, I would sleep with an eye open around that person. But he says, do not let this hypocrisy stand. Fight. Much more coming. So call him out on this. Call him out on the hypocrisy there. But Bill Maher, I mean, he's got all the pedophile statements too. Have you seen those?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was looking over that one the other day, and I just found it amusing that, or at least kind of frustrating to see that Bill Maher was able to make a joke with Michelle Bachmann and Planet of the Apes, and then you have the same thing with Valerie Jarrett and Roseanne a few weeks ago, and she lost her entire livelihood off of it. And here he is, and this wouldn't be the first time Bill Maher has had a controversial thing happen to him. I mean, just the other, I think it was like a few years ago, he used the N-word, and a lot of us were in a tizzy about that. Why isn't he fired? That was completely bad taste. And yet he's able to skirt through. Yeah,
they get away with so much. And his Kid Love Productions. I'm hoping to have. I've got somebody now that's volunteered, hopefully, and we're going to talk about it. But he's going to start doing a series for me. I'm going to upload it to my channel where he does the full breakdown, or he does maybe he'll do the research, I'll do the reading, I don't know. But the full breakdown of each individual profile, like a Bill Maher video and a Bill Clinton video, and just like every single one of the pedophiles and what we know so far. And I would like to get that whole, I'm sure I'm going to get banned for it, but I want to get the whole series out there and let people, distribute it, just short, fast, sweet for people. If you want to talk about a specific person, you just go to that video and then show it to people. That'd be great. His last post, though, is it's just a link, 1864. It's just a link to an article on Sarah Carter talking about the evidence is suggesting that the infamous Trump Tower meeting with the Russians was a giant setup to disparage the Trump campaign. I mean, we know that Hillary was involved directly with the Russians and with the UK and with Saudi Arabia, Al-Walid, bin Talal Al-Walid. So it's really, you mentioned double standard. I mean, how much more blatant of a double standard do you have than Hillary and Trump right there? I mean, if I were running for president and someone was like, look, I got dirt on your opponent, I'd probably take up a meeting too. I mean, it just makes sense. You want to win, especially when you know that they're doing the kind of stuff that Hillary was doing.
And then you have the connection with Russia and the Clintons. I mean, then you go all the way into Uranium One. I mean, we don't even have to go into Crossfire Hurricane. and all that fun stuff in Britain. I mean, if you want to do the real collusion, right there, you have the Clintons, you have the Podestas. I mean, and the worst part about it that was actually on a New York Times article.
Really, which one?
It was back in, I think it was 2015. They did an article about the Uranium One deal.
I mean, we know Rosenstein, we know Mueller were involved, you know, and then it gets into like Comey, McCabe, or Bruce Orr and his wife, Christopher Steele. I mean, it was just this long line, like all of the leadership plus some, you know, and there's just so many trails going back. But we're not supposed to talk about that. We're supposed to try to find some dirt on Trump, and that I don't understand. Like, I understand what cognitive dissonance is, and I understand the ego thing, and I understand people will rather just get mad than find out they were wrong. But I just don't understand people's on the left that don't understand that this stuff is a complete double standard. Even if you hate Trump, you should also hate Hillary, and you should also think she should go to prison. But I think legitimately they hate the country, and they don't care if someone betrayed the country, as long as they don't betray the group. And that group is way beyond just the U.S. That group is the ideological group of communism that is being used to control them. You know, these guys would join forces with Germany's Antifa way before they would like fight off you know, the foreign invaders of the USA or something. Like, if China invaded us, they'd probably team up with them because they're communists. So we have such a brain damage issue. Like, how do we help these people? There's nothing really that I can think of. I mean, we heal them with medicine and help them out with solutions and holistic medicine and get the big pharma stuff off their backs, and maybe that'll help some of them. But, you know, I feel like some of these are so brain damaged and volatile. The only place for them is away from society. A joke in the I used to debate like the different groups within the anarchist movement. Like, back in the day, the anarchist movement was a legitimate political like party, and then they just cracked down on them with the sedition laws and stuff, and wiped out the party basically. But I learned my debate skills and philosophy and stuff actually debating a lot of these Antifa fools on Facebook groups. And you know, they have this anarcho-communism term, which is an oxymoron, because you can't have anarchy and communism together. You need a centralized state. But they don't get that. They think that it's going to disappear after the state takes over everything and then gives it to the people, which has never, ever, ever happened in history and never will. But, you know, I try to argue the other end of that from a capitalist free market perspective and stuff. And you don't get anywhere with that with those guys. They hate my group, the voluntarists, as much as they hate Trump.
I used to be actually an anarchist for one point myself.
Yeah,
I was under the anarcho-syndicist.
Oh yeah. The green ones, right?
No, the red. They're the actual. They're the ones that they're the black and red. They actually are what Antifa is trying to be, but they're not.
Okay, I call it communist, but yeah.
Yeah, and the idea that, you know, we can work together as people, not really in a capitalist system, because I was kind of anti-capitalist until you actually understand what it does, what true capitalism looks like, and that kind of really swayed my opinion more towards that.
Well, you're a living example that I'm completely wrong, that people can be saved.
Because I used to be a big Ayn Rand hater. I hated Ayn Rand. I had no understand. You know, I was a big Bernie bro, if you will, because I argued socialism, and then I'm like, okay, let's look at the current economic system. It's capitalism. Actually, no, it's not capitalism. It's cronyism, because actually the state actually offers all these big companies extra incentives, extra ordinances, so on and so forth. I mean, we can even include net neutrality within this, because it gave these big techs, Facebook, Google, Amazon, these data plans that were so cheap for them that they were able to focus most of it on actual computer engineering.
Anywhere that you look in the entire U.S. Western or the entire Western world, we are now far more down the spectrum of collectivism than we are capitalism. Like, I consider it a spectrum. Some people think we're either one or the other, but like we're very close to full communism. and the capitalism's like way over here. We have like a little bit of that left, like it may be in the cell phone area or something, or computers, because that keeps getting faster and cheaper. But like everything else is subsidized, or the government's picking the winners and losers or something, and then it's all bad. It's all falling apart. It's all shit.
Yeah, and then I think it was Q who was mentioning about the Sherman Act and how they can start prosecuting people under antitrust laws, and that's something I think they should have been doing from the get-go. I mean, you have so many companies that are actually not very many companies that control majority of products.
Well, this is a great point, a great selling point for the whole idea of free market capitalism without government, because all of these laws that we needed, the unmasking laws were there with the KKK. The Sherman Act was there if they wanted to enforce it. All these antitrust, everything, it's all there. But when the bad guys are in power, they don't use it against themselves. They'll enforce it against you, like we have Lois Lerner in the IRS situation attacking conservative groups. But, you can never trust people in power. I mean, I like to compare Trump to like a good king, which is theoretically like the best form of government. Like a virtuous king is like a great guy to have around. But what if his son is an asshole? What if his son is a mass murdering monster, like a Nero, and then you're in trouble, and then you don't get to pick that. So when there's powers, bad guys and psychopaths get into power. They get into positions of power, just like the pedophiles go for these kid charity events. Any person that now is involved in the charity of children, like I'm suspicious just by default. It's such a trend, and that's a sad state of being.
And even when it comes to the economic of all this, we are the most wealthy country that's ever existed in the world. Imagine if that money were to actually be able to be flow much more effectively than it is. Wages would be going up. Everyone talks about having a minimum wage. That would not work, because then that puts more pressure on the actual workers who are down there. Like the middle class and the poor are going to be paying more out of their pocket, which is something, that's really wrong to them, because they're paying all these extra taxes.
Minimum wage laws are one of the most effective tools of actual racism in the world. It destroys poor, and especially the minorities. It was basically designed to destroy the Black community, and it worked.
Wasn't that the Johnson?
Lyndon Baines Johnson's Great Society project.
Great Societies, that was it, with Detroit and stuff like that.
Yeah, he destroyed, and it's funny because they were actually like doing really, even back in the Jim Crow era, they were doing well. They had they had a stronger family unit than the white family, lower divorce rate. They were closing the IQ gap between Black and white. I mean, it was really great. And then the welfare system kicked in, and now 70% plus fatherlessness in the Black community. And then, of course, the violence, and then, of course, the drug use, because they've used some of this like smack my bitch up kind of rap music with the wrong message, which they completely control because of that whole system is corrupt as hell, and they make them play these kind of songs, and then they glorify it with women and with wealth, and with fun and excitement, and then that's what people have to look up to now.
And then wasn't it, I forgot who it was. I think it was someone in the Nixon administration when they talked about the criminalization of certain controlled substances. Like if we wanted to go after a hippie, we would go after people with pot. If we wanted to go after the blacks, we'd go after heroin, so on and so forth. They
don't care what people put in their bodies. What they care about is like how can we like strategically, selectively destroy this group? Like the anti-war movement. Yeah, go after the drugs. You take out all the hippies, and then you can stop the anti-war movement. Or the blacks, crack, like the super far worse punishment for crack rather than just regular cocaine, because crack was cheaper, and then so they do these kind of tricks, and it's all strategy, it's all tactics, it's all power.
One thought that really kind of came to mind real quick about the businesses, antitrust act. Remember how they had the big merger with Bayer and Monsanto?
Yeah.
What in I'm thinking like in a 4D, 5D chess type of move, where did they allow that merger? That way they didn't have to worry about two different lawsuits.
Here's the thing, I think, okay, because Bayer is a German company, and Germany is giving us a lot of shit right now with Merkel, okay? So I think that we just got that $300 million lawsuit that went through against Monsanto. Dropped Bayer's price 12% overnight, basically. I think that was the prelude to wiping out Bayer, which is one of their biggest company. I think it's a definite 5D chess move.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I'm not sure with the e, um, with the meeting with the EU. I forgot if the tariffs were over. I'm not sure if they cut them or not.
I know that they're kind of pushing back against the Iran tariffs,
Mm-hmm.
but we're kind of just like pummeling things through, like economically, like we're using our leverage, and they don't really have a lot of say. Like the situation, the whole I like to talk about the economy too. The whole economic situation, it's really like who crashes first at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And Europe everybody on the left likes to talk good about Europe, but Europe is so over leveraged. Like their situation is way worse than both West and East. So
Mm-hmm.
the center is really screwed. They got no power in this. They got no leverage.
Mm-hmm.
China has some leverage. Russia has some leverage. The BRICS nations possibly have some leverage. A lot of people are moving away from the dollar, and that's bad for us. But the U.S. has a whole lot of leverage when it comes to that. Now, right now, Germany is they're in a situation where they need Russian oil, and we're trying to push our energy power in the world and kind of cut them off a little bit. So there's so many forces at play right now. But Trump on the economic stage, like if you're following the queue in the political stage, all the shit he's doing, like being ahead of them 2 steps, same thing economically. He's ahead of them 2 steps, and he's just winning and winning and winning, and it's beautiful to see. Like he's just forcing it down their throats, basically.
And when you had the unbridled U.S. economy, I mean, we could take some blows if we needed to, and we'd still be able to kick.
Yeah, it takes me back to capitalism, because back in the early days of this country, kind of when we earned I think it was 60% of the world's wealth in a few generations. Back then you could live a lifetime, never meet a federal government employee.
Mm-hmm.
So small, it was so limited, and that's. I don't even want that, because that grows into this in 200 years. It's all it takes. But
mm-hmm.
If I like to use that as an example for people, because we didn't have all these taxes. We still had the roads. We still had better schools than now. We were ahead of most people in education. And,
mm-hmm.
and we had our defense and everything else. Nobody wanted to mess with us. We won all these wars. And at the same point, then we became so wealthy and such a great middle class, and we lifted all of the poor up to this greatest standard of living in the history of the world. If we had gone 5% further, if the founding fathers had just, bucked up and did the right thing, respect to them. But if they had just gotten rid of the government completely and given freedom back to people, we would have built something that would have never been dislodged and ever. We would already be exploring space while everyone else is trying to, deal with all of this central bank crap. And in reality, it only takes one good example. So people would have eventually rebelled and set their own nations in the same kind of direction. And then we would have freed the whole planet with that one move right there. Mm-hmm. But they decided to set up a state, a limited government. And, there's a lot of very intelligent arguments for it, and people don't really understand the arguments against. And when you try to hear about that, they get suppressed, like the whole, the anarchist party. If you go look up the history of that, it's so sad what happened there.
I remember back in history class, they talked about the executions of Sacco Vanzetti, mm-hmm. And how they blamed. I forgot what they actually blamed him on. I think it was like arson or something of that nature. But when they actually came to the trial of it, they actually literally just said, "Look, they're anarchists. They want to take over. They want to destroy everything," and then they just killed them.
Kind of what Mueller's doing now.
Exactly.
Still in the court of public opinion. So it's interesting, because now we're at this interesting time where the elite are failing. They are on the run, and they're losing left and right. But at the same time, we have like cryptocurrencies and stuff, which, logically speaking, to me, I'll use Bitcoin as an example. It's not my favorite. I don't even think it's going to be the one that wins. I think it's like the MySpace, and then the Facebook is coming along. But as an example, Bitcoin, decentralized, like as long as they can't take down every single computer on the whole planet at once, you cannot stop the system. There's no one to arrest. You can't, there's no head to cut off of the snake. So in theory, once it becomes, it's early stages, it's not convenient right now for people who don't understand technical stuff. It's really like in the early stages. But when it becomes user friendly, some of the stuff like EOS, Daniel Larimer, things like that, they have this end user in mind, when this stuff becomes user friendly, just like an email system, people are going to learn it. Just like the internet, people are going to learn it. It's going to change everything. And the natural consequence of that, like you're talking about down the road, the butterfly effect, the natural consequence of this, inevitably, I think, eventually, depending on the rate of adoption, is that governments will no longer be able to make fiat currencies work. No one will want them. And that means that they will no longer be able to just print and live off debt, screw over the generations, build a lot of power, and then use that power to be corrupt over us. So a government that is forced to live within its budget, with a balanced budget, is infinitely preferable and less powerful and less able to be corrupt and tyrannical than something where they can print billions of dollars at a whim, spend it, and then screw everyone else with inflation. So, it's like for the first time in human history, not only can capitalism actually happen, like I don't think it's stoppable. I think it's inevitable at this point. Like whether or not there's no philosophical argument to it. Now it's a mathematical argument. Now it's a matter of time.
Especially with all the technology we have with banking itself. I mean, we have credit cards, we have wireless banking when it comes to our smartphones. You just tap your smartphone on a card swiper, and then you can transfer money that way. I mean, if you really what you could do, you could just overhaul the entire infrastructure and change it from fiat currency over to like cryptos, and it would work basically the same way.
They're doing it. Well, even cars are putting blockchain technology into their stuff to make it run better now. I think it was the Porsche doing that. So banks are using it. Big businesses are using it. They're bringing in experts to like make their stuff more efficient using blockchain technology. That's step one. Step two is going to be these bridge technologies that bridge the different types of popular technology coins and make it convenient and seamless to switch around. And then you can just turn your Bitcoin into whatever with a swipe of a card as well. And Starbucks is now accepting Bitcoin for payment. I mean, they're doing a lot of stupid stuff as well, but that's a huge step. John McAfee just came out with like, I finally got my unhackable Bitcoin wallet, the Bitfeed, which is like, it's beautiful. I've got an affiliate link, these steps, the unhackable step, the unhackable wallet, that means, if it stays unhackable, no one's claimed the $250,000 reward, but if it stays unhackable, then people's confidence are going to go up. They're not going to be like, oh, I'm going to get hacked, So then that's going to increase adoption. All of the people who are just sitting on the fence, but they didn't have the technology skills to stay safe. They didn't want to go through all of the hassle of like a paper wallet or a cold storage laptop or something. They didn't want to spend $1,200 on a Trezor or something, one of the other wallets. They're going to then jump in. As the economy goes down, people are going to go for whatever safe, and gold and silver and cryptos are going to take probably 80% of that transfer. All of this wealth that's in the stock market and everything else, that's gone. That's going to disappear. But wealth never disappears. It's just going to transfer. And those people are going to then be the beneficiaries. I mean, 1% adoption now, but 5 years down the road, this technology is growing so fast, it's going to be like internet or cell phones. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And there are a couple other things. Like I really want to meet McAfee because he's talking about a encrypted ghost phone where no one can track and trace you. There's the technology soon to get rid of the internet and replace it with a peer-to-peer, like a torrent system of internet where you can be your own internet service provider and sell it to your neighbors and set up nodes, and no one, there's no like big company to then come in and shut you down. Everyone will have their own options. For $600, you can set up your own internet provider. So this stuff is going to change everything, like by default, by mathematics, by trustless systems. There's no real, for me, it's an easy prediction. I don't usually like to make predictions, but to me, it's just a matter of when, not if. What do you think? I don't know if you follow the crypto stuff much, but.
Not really. I mean, I look at it from time to time. So I'm like more and more in the dark of that because I'm looking at it, and a lot of it's kind of at this point, like you were saying, it's kind of too tech heavy for a lot of people who really have no knowledge of it.
It's very theory right now. It's very it's on the interwebs, but it's getting like Starbucks. It's getting widespread adoption. It's getting out there. People have now heard about it. The average person that gets into it makes money. So
I know Mines recently changed their tokens over Ethereum.
Very cool. Very cool. I need to get into Mines. I never checked it out yet.
They were doing, I think it was like 400 tokens equals, was it 0.3 Ethereum,
Very cool.
something like that. And that's just with trace regular interaction, like commenting, sharing, linking it. Kind of like how DTube and Steemit kind of do the thing where you comment, where you add to contribute to something, you get paid.
I don't use Steemit much, but I use DTube because all the censorship and stuff. And I've earned, I don't know what it's worth. I've earned like $40 of Steam. So whatever that's worth. I'm interested in that kind of technology. It's coming along, like it's still a little slow, but you know, it's an option for people. I encourage people to go check it out if you are tired of being censored. You know, BitChute, Minds, and DTube are the decentralized ones, I think. As Minds is the one I haven't messed with yet.
I know it's going to be a matter. It's within a matter of time, and like BitChute finally has like an app that you can use for it. Because right now, all you can do is go on the internet, and you have to use on your browser. But I wouldn't be surprised that, you know, when like YouTube finally hits rock bottom, which at this point it looks like it's going to with all the controversies that comes with it. You know, they'll probably have an app for it like on your phone or on like a Roku or something like that. That way, it's much easier access. And then when that happens, you know, people are just going to jump to it because, you know, they have a much better terms of service with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think of crypto as like and the internet as well as like the ultimate butterfly effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna rock the whole world and everything.
What was the joke with it? It was the DARPA project that got away.
Maybe some people say that it was a deep state project to try to take over the money system, but you know, if that's the case, it's kind of like QAnon. They're really shooting themselves in the foot. Some people say the same thing about Q. Like, if that's the case, then they're doing everything wrong. Like, you know, you don't want to have a decentralized system that's trustless and peer-to-peer, that's open source and people can confirm and read. You know, if you've got a system where you need to keep it centralized and you need to be able to print money at will and you need to be able to track and trace people. You can track and trace people with Bitcoin. I mean, there's flaws like if I send you money on Bitcoin, then I can see your public address and I can't hack you or anything. It's just like an email address, but I can go and then look at the blockchain and see how much money you have, you know? So there are problems with that. You can get around that with like having multiple wallets and you just have one as your, you know, the one that you send out of and stuff. But some of the other currencies like Monero, like the privacy coins, these are going to destroy things like the IRS, things like the ability to collect taxes. I mean, all taxes will be then voluntary.
I know Monero is actually, you can actually mine Monero off of BitChute.
Yeah,
they actually have an application that actually goes to an external address and you can actually start mining it yourself. And you know, you can modify how many threads you will mine and the speed it does it at.
I know I got into it for a while and I was trying to actually do some mining myself, but the technical part of it got me. So, you know, I did buy a small like miner for an altcoin called Decred, and I sell it for Bitcoins. So basically I have like a little bit of Bitcoin every day. It's like $1 or something, but it's interesting. I don't really, you know, I don't want to dump a lot of money into it yet because that whole thing is changing so fast right now, and the technology just keeps changing, and then the hash strength gets stronger and stronger. But we're getting into crypto, and my people hate crypto.
Just in general, I mean, look at all the different technologies. How they're like, oh, they're going to use it against us. You know, like they're going to track our emails and so on and so forth. And notice how recently, especially during like the Great Awakening era, like the Q times, we've been able to basically play judo with it, and we're just gonna basically use it right back at you. You know,
I was just thinking that, yeah, like the internet, that was created for basically military project, and they try to use it to track and trace and control everything, and they did. But now we're using it to overthrow the whole system. Like we catch up.
I mean, you know how they're doing with Twitter. I mean, Trump will troll people on Twitter about all the memes that are going on. And like I mean, this could be actually the resurgence of independent industries.
Yeah, and you know, never before in human history have we had such concentration of wealth and power. But on the flip side, never before in human history have we had such flow of free information to the masses. Okay, so I like to compare crypto to that, because what the internet did for information, crypto is going to do for money, and it's going to take away that whole central bank system. We won't have banks in 10 years, I think.
Yeah, especially with what's going on right now.
Imagine that. Yeah, imagine if you're a Bible person, Jesus hated the moneylenders, okay, for a reason. He whipped them and threw them out the temple. If you're not a Bible person, just look at the central bank concept, the Federal Reserve, the history of the Federal Reserve, and all the corruption and the murder and everything.
There was a really good video I watched when it just explained the central banking system. It was an animated video from a while ago. What it was called?
There's one good one called "The Story of Your Enslavement." There's one good one called "The American Dream." There's Zeitgeist has some problems with it. It's kind of communist, but Zeitgeist has a great breakdown of the financial Federal Reserve system and all of that. I got to meet Peter Joseph once. He's a really smart guy. I don't agree with the centralized control of resources, even if robots are helping. I know the technology though.
Mm-hmm. Like the video I remember watching, it basically talked about the origin of it, what it does, how it changed, and then it started talking about like 1912 with Woodrow Wilson and how it transferred over to right now. But this was a while ago, so it had like the what's his name? Had Bernanke instead. So
was this like a little animated like cartoon kind of with a like a funny sense of humor, or was this?
It was serious. It was like a serious thing.
Okay.
It had humor, but it was also kind of serious at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. The three that I mentioned are the ones that I've seen that were really pretty good about breaking down the central bank. People don't understand how fractional reserve banking works.
And then, wasn't there like only two chairmen right now? And then you can just, he can just, at this point, appoint people now.
I think he got 3 out of 4 appointed or something like that. I think Sarah Westall was mentioning how Trump already runs the Fed now because his people are in. He's got more to appoint, just like the Supreme Court. But you know who his hero is, right? On his wall, he's got Andrew Jackson.
I killed the banks.
I killed the banks, Jackson. One of my heroes as well. So people ask me as a voluntarist, how can I support Trump? Like, how do you support Trump? You're supposed to be an anarchist. Dude, he kind of is too, in a way. He's a law and order kind of guy, but at the same point, he's doing all the things right that I like.
Andrew Jackson, the only president to ever have on the White House lawn.
Well, I mean, anybody that they try to kill and he beats him down with a cane, I like him. I got a cane too, so I kind of relate, Yeah, brother. Is there any topics you'd like to cover? Yeah, I know you mentioned you wanted to talk about, was it Meme Wars?
Meme News.
Meme News, okay.
Okay. So I'm actually the CAO of a new independent news aggregate group called Meme News, and what we do is that we spotlight several different creators throughout the who are creating channels and just like CNTV where they have their own shows. You just create your own content, and then it just shows up on the newsletter every Monday. Just sign up in the newsletter, and then you just follow it that way.
That is so cool. That's a great idea. Yeah. Well, all right. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about, and you want to tell people where to find you before we go?
Sure. You can find me on. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. Mine's MeWe. I'm basically everywhere. If you my normal what's it called? Name on it is Tsar Alexei.
Okay.
TSARALEXI.
Okay.
I kind of get the whole the Russian bot thing with it, even though I did that 5 years prior to all this. But anyways, I have a Facebook page, Contemptible Thoughts. I have an archive of every video I've done since I started. I have the Meme News page on Facebook. We also have it on Twitter. That's Meme News UG.
Okay.
And then the website is memenews.co.
.co? C-O? You lagged up a bit. Say that
C-O.
again. Okay, gotcha.
There we go.
Brother, I appreciate your time and everything. Is there anything else that we missed before we go?
Um, the only thing I can think of is just the education system, how we have to prepare it. Really, yeah.
The system is so broken.
Yeah.
I mean,
Once we fix that system, I think, like anything else, it'll just kind of fall into place.
yeah, it all starts there. It all starts there. I mean, all of the socialism, all the collectivism, the anger, the hate, the worship of the government and the state. I consider that the most harmful religion in the history of the world.
Mhm.
Because people really believe that it's necessary. They believe that it's like even if they don't like it, they believe it's a necessary evil.
Mhm.
That is such a damaging thing, because if they won't go outside of their belief system and actually look at the arguments, then how do you ever overcome that problem, which is the source, in my opinion, of 99% of our problems. And I'm not talking about utopia. I'm talking about, the government's causing the war. They're causing the theft and the corruption, and they're causing most of the violence, and they're causing most of the poverty, which is what leads to the violence and other problems. They're causing the distortions, and these three-letter agencies are waging war on the people, and that's what they've been doing since day one. That's what they were built for. There's no such thing as an FBI that serves the people and does a good job for more than like 10, 20 years, because after that it'll become corrupt. Any position of power.
The one thing I think that anybody who ever goes in education at all, I mean, student or parent or teacher or administration, the one thing that everyone has to remember is ask the question why. Don't just accept everything at face value. Ask them why we do this. Like, for instance, one thing is mandatory vaccinations, right? I always ask, why do we do this? What is it for? What is the purpose? Are we allowed to opt out? I always thought we should have an opt out for basically any choice you're ever given. You should be able to opt out of it, because at that point, you're basically going against your own best interests.
You're a voluntarist. Congratulations. You're an anarcho-capitalist now, if you believe that, because I think I have no problem with people getting together and setting up a government and taxing each other, as long as it's voluntary. I don't care. I don't mind socialism if people get together with Bernie Sanders and they want to like pull their resources and buy some land and then share everything. That's fine with me, as long as you don't try to force me to do it.
Left libertarian, if I remember correctly, was what I originally, last time I checked, I was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, libertarians, like, they vote, and they're better off. I consider like libertarian is like, it's like baby voluntarist. Like, they haven't gone all the way yet, but they're on the right path, and it's very exciting to see that whole party grow as well. There's still a lot of like the pros and stuff in there, but if you believe that all human interaction should be without force, and that you should always have an opt-out option, you believe in natural rights, then the non-aggression principle, like, a little bit different from pacifism. Like, I would fight back viciously, but I would never assault anyone. I would never start the aggression. So that's the difference. But if you believe in those things, I mean, Ron Paul, Judge Napolitano, these are voluntarists. I mean, they've all but admitted it.
Little Thomas Jefferson in there, how you deal with things as they happen.
Yeah. All right, brother. So, well, I really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on the show, and everybody, check him out. This is an interesting guy, and he's got an up-and-coming YouTube channel. And I'm really interested in that meme news thing. I thought about doing something like that. I never had time to, but I'm glad someone did. That's pretty cool.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. And you have a great day. I'm going to hit the stop button.